From the Multiply family of churches, we are Behind Open Doors, a podcast designed to take you behind the scenes, discovering what it takes to multiply disciples, leaders, and new churches. We are located in the U.S., the Hampton Roads region of Virginia. Visit us at multiplythechurch.com. My name is Katie Dininny, Executive Assistant to the leadership team at Ocean View Christian Academy. I'm joined by my husband of 20 years, the Executive Director of the Multiply family of churches, Aaron Dininny.
Hey.
Hey.
Good job.
Whoa, that makes you sound like a big deal. I like it.
Yeah. I like things to make me sound like I'm a big deal.
You are to me, babe.
All right, good. That's all that matters, I suppose. What are we talking about today?
So today at Behind Open Doors, what we're going to talk about is
Pod.
how to help multiply disciple-making efforts, about things that matter.
Like what?
Today, we want to tackle a difficult subject that we've worked hard at over the years.
Yes,
money.
We have. You and I have worked very, very hard on this over the years, for sure.
You've heard stats about how many marriages fail to arguments not seeing eye to eye on money.
Yeah.
And when we say stats, what are we talking about? What do you have?
Yeah. Well, the average, there's all kinds of different stuff out there, but 50% divorce rate in marriages in our country, we'll say 50%. That's quite high. It's not new news, but I've seen some lower, 40 to 50%, whatever. But in that percentage of marriages that end in divorce, it's very likely that one of the top 3 reasons is going to be money. So a lot of times it's just maybe just don't see eye to eye anymore. Maybe they got married too young, and that's been a reason as well. But money is going to be in that top 3 or 4 of reasons why marriages fail.
Well, we've had a lot of discussions over the years about money.
Discussions. Yes. Some lively ones, indeed.
Passionate
discussions.
And they've been difficult. We probably didn't see eye to eye at first, but we found a good rhythm over the years. Should I say, as we've gotten older.
Yes. We are indeed getting older. I think it's helpful just to pause for 2 seconds to say, we're talking about this from our marriage perspective, but not everybody that's listening is married. We understand that. So think about this in a household perspective, I guess, is what we just want to say off the bat. Here's how we handle it as a team, as a partnership, and you're going to have to interpret this and apply this in your own ways. But for me, I don't really want this to be about our story of how we do this. I really want to relate our story to the principles that we've either followed or more so realized over time.
Yes.
So we had kind of driving principles that were helpful, but we realized a lot of stuff over the years that I wish we would have been a little bit more intentional about. And so we're going to talk about that. But let's give them the principles up front.
All right.
Let's give them all 5 right up front. No discussion yet, and we'll go.
All right. So we're going to decide. We're going to develop, devote, dream, and we're going to discover. So I think to flesh that out a little bit, we're going to decide early in your family, in your house, what your philosophy of generosity is going to be.
Yes. Shh, no more. That's it. Let's get next one.
And then we're going to develop a household
system,
a spreadsheet, bill pay, regular accountability. Maybe you like to eat out a lot, so we're going to call that an allowance.
Maybe you like to eat out a lot. Number 3.
We're going to devote some time to talk openly about finances, putting feelings and pride aside for one another. Mm-hmm. We're going to dream together and do it often. Write things down. Write down your goals and your desires. Should we suggest a whiteboard?
Ooh, yes.
And then we're going to discover someone outside your household to get feedback. Hear ideas. Make sure you're not crazy. This one is a trusted person in your discover mode.
Yes, exactly. So decide, develop, devote, dream, discover. So hopefully those principles will be helpful for you as we walk through these things, whether you're listening, again, as a single person, as a young person, as an older person, as a married person, as a not married person, whatever the case may be. We've got, I think, some helpful examples here that will help us. But as usual, what's going to be most important here is that we anchor all of this in truth, in scriptures. We want to be gospel-centered in our approach to finances and resources. So with your permission, host,
Yes.
I would love to work through some of that theology of biblical foundation right now. Is that cool?
Yes, please
And
proceed.
fantastic. Wonderful. So a guy named Randy Alcorn is going to be sort of he's not saying anything groundbreaking in the stuff that he says, but he's pretty foundational in how to think about money as a Christian, and then how to do so as church leaders as well. But he has some really great stuff. The Treasure Principle is a foundational book on these things. And here's his underlying foundation. He says, grasping God's ownership of everything is the foundation of a biblical theology of money. So let me pause. When I say biblical theology, all that I mean is a whole Bible perspective on money, right? Like let's take the principles that the scripture teaches on money and distill it down to a few things. And he says ownership of everything, God owning everything, is the foundation of that. So he says, faithful money managing stewards act in the owner's interest, regularly consulting him to understand and implement his investment priorities, search the scriptures, seek God's wisdom, then give, save, and spend his money well, and thereby love him, your family, your neighbors, and a needy world. So it distills down to like everything we got is on loan from God.
Yeah.
Right? Everything we got.
Yeah, not really yours.
Yep.
Steward it well.
Yep, we are stewards or managers of the things that we have. And so, again, that's an overarching kind of biblical view of those things. There's a couple passages I could anchor this in and some factoids you can look up to. There are twice as many verses in the Bible devoted to money than to faith and prayer combined. Did you know that? 2,350 verses that are devoted to money specifically in the Bible. That's pretty crazy.
That is.
15% of Jesus' recorded words in the Gospels are about money. 15% of Jesus' messages and things that he said was about money. So there's all kinds of examples in the scriptures that we could lay out from, glorifying God with your money in Matthew 6 from the Sermon on the Mount, the example of the rich young ruler needing to walk away because he was sad. He had great wealth, and Jesus said, give it all up and you could enter the kingdom of heaven. And of course, there's a lot to expound on that, but basically the guy was like, yeah, I can't give up my stuff, So it's a big deal in all the scriptures, and it's foundational. The scriptures, of course, being foundational to how we want to handle and talk about these things today. I love this quote from Hunter Beaumont. I shouldn't have stopped, but it's Denver Faith and Work Institute of Faith and Work is where he's out of. So it says, your heart should have a healthy fear of the love of money, but it should also have a noble vision for how creating capital can lift up others and advance the kingdom. That means we all need a plan, and it'll include things like budgets and investments and wills and giving and all this stuff. So what this means is that you should give. And you should keep giving and stretch yourself in generosity, because ultimately it is a heart issue. And again, I think this has become cliched at this point, but money is not the root of all evil. Of course, the love of money is the root of all evil, because it ends up replacing God, and we make an idol out of money, the pursuit of wealth, and even security, and seeing it as what's going to keep me safe, whatever the case may be. We pursue money over God. It's idolatry, and that's one of the reasons we get these big warnings in Scripture about it.
So I have a healthy fear of money.
Fear of money or fear of the love of money? Fear
of the love of money.
Okay.
So I don't love money, and I would say that probably wholeheartedly over the last 12 to 15 years, because we started at a place where we didn't have much to be generous with. But when we decided to dive in and be generous, we did just that. We just jumped, and it really was by faith that God would call us to be generous. because we didn't have a good budget or a good system in place. And I think that when we embarked on that journey of generosity, it wasn't so much of a together decision. It was, well, this is what the Bible says. This is what we'll do. And although I realized that, it was you who said, and we're going to go this way. This is how we will do this. So I followed your lead in the generosity for our household. Now, if I'd been by myself, I'm not sure I would have taken that leap so quickly, because you get scared. You need security, and people rely on money sometimes for security. I think that maybe is where I grew up, in that security was rooted in money. We always had enough food on our table, and there was always a car to drive us to school, or what have you. My family didn't go without, and I thank the Lord for that now as I look back on my life. But I also know that it drives me still, that I fight against that.
Yeah, it was formative, right, back in those years. I think, to go back to what you were saying a second ago, that we, at one point, I can't remember what year it was. Like I said, a lot of what we're talking about today, you and I have reflected on in order to have this conversation. We didn't necessarily do all these things very intentionally along the way, which is why we're doing this, because we want to help people be more intentional with what they do. But as we're looking back and reflecting, thinking, man, it must have been 2006, maybe 7, that we finally decided we were going to give 10% of our income. Yep. And I was already a youth pastor. We were already in ministry. We had just had, or we were about to have our first kid. I don't remember what
we had a home.
Was. We had a house.
We did not have, we didn't have any children, but we had a mortgage payment. Yes.
We didn't have a lot beyond that, but we did have enough. And I remember we were kind of trudging along, 5% of our income and 7% and 3%, whatever, and just give whatever we kind of could. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. It came more as a conviction from the scriptures that we should give God the first fruits of what we have. And that was like, we just have to mark it down. And it seems like in the scripture, a tithe is pretty general marked starting point. So we're going to do 10%. And that's what we did. Mm-hmm. We just said, this is it. I remember that. And I remember that being hard. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that being hard, but I also don't remember that because I think
blocked it out.
I think maybe I blocked it out. I think we were in a decent place. We didn't overspend. We didn't buy a lot of things. We had payments to make, and we were diligent with what we had. But I do remember that we bought a TV, and we'd had a very old TV for a very long time. And we bought a TV, and we promptly found out we were pregnant with baby number 1. Within the week.
The next day.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it was like a Sunday morning the next day. I remember that very clearly.
And here begins Katie's tears in every financial situation.
Yeah.
Every financial conversation that we have that's pretty large. And I was already putting that TV back in the box. I was taking it back to the store because we were going to have another mouth to feed, and just, everything had to stop. So, yeah.
That didn't happen.
We didn't do that.
I probably talked you out of that.
Right.
Because I'm more of like, we're going to be okay. Look at, now we're going to have a baby. That's not till 9 months from now. We got lots of time to pay this thing off and figure it out. That's, you see the one who's a little bit more strict and disciplined with our money, which, by the way, it was about a year and a half later that it went from me handling finances to somebody else handling finances. That was not me.
I did do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about that more in a minute. All right. Let's lay a little bit more foundation here. One more thing I want to share, that you can always rely on Craig Blomberg to give us some really deep, meaty stuff from the scriptures. Professor of New Testament. I forget which college he's at right now, but he says 5 different things on the perspective of biblical theology of money. I'm going to zoom in on one of them, but all 5 of them are good. Money and material possessions were created by God to be good gifts for his people, to be used for all creation's flourishing. All right, that was start of it. First thing was good, right? Number 2, though, After human sin entered the world, money often can have a powerfully seductive force for selfish ambition and even to be used to harm others and the rest of creation. Okay, after the fall, bad things happen, including with money. Perhaps, number 3, that perhaps the best safeguard against the wrong use of wealth is to be generous in giving it away. I love that one, right? Safeguard what you've got, then be open-handed with it, and you won't be as attached to it in the first place. Number 4 is the one I want to zoom in on a little bit. It says this: when some people, through no fault of their own, have so little that their health and well-being are in danger, or even their lives, it means some other people have too much. By the way, this is a biblical theology of money. So this is what we see in the scriptures. I think it's also what we can say we see in real life. I'll give you the 5th one. I want to go back to that again. The 5th one is stewardship is ultimately a matter of the heart and an indication of spiritual life and maturity. So we know that to be true. 2 Corinthians 9:7 says, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver, right? We know those things to be true. I want to go back to number 4 for a second. It says, when some people, through no fault of their own, have so little resources, money, that their health and well-being are in danger, or even their lives being in danger, it means that some other people have too much. So here we have, this principle where if we have a plan, if you have a plan, if one has a plan to grow their investment potential, their financial security, we should always remember as Christians that there are those who cannot do that.
Right.
There are those who are unable to do that, even in our country, the richest country in the world. So a strong biblical theology of money means taking care of the poor and the under-resourced as well. And that's really the point of number 4 there. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I personally don't think about is the future. Do I need to pay my mortgage, and do I need to feed my children, and whatever other obligations that I have? Those are going to be important. Being generous has always been one of the first things that we've done. In fact, we went through in our marriage this past year or so a couple job changes for myself, and one of the things that hurt the most was deciding to be a little less generous based on the income we were receiving. And insert the tears here, because it hurt my feelings. It hurt my feelings that I couldn't be generous. I felt that it was my fault. Insert all the serious emotions that go along with this road to generosity that we have been on as a married couple, as we've taught our families, as we have walked with other families, young people, youth even, in teaching them about being generous. And I felt like I had failed that generous mission. I would say I'm still working through that, but through the circumstances, having to be less generous in my mind it really hurt.
Yeah.
Because I don't need as much as someone else does.
Sure.
And that's always my heart behind the generosity.
Well, I think let's go ahead and jump into the first practice here, the first principle here, because this speaks to that, and I want to expand on that a little bit and respond to what you said. So what does all this mean? Based on these principles, these truths, this theology that we see in the scriptures, what does all this mean? I want to get practical for the rest of this episode today. The first principle that we landed upon was to decide early what your family or your household philosophy of generosity will be. All right. So you and I in our household have to be on the same page of what does generosity look like? Like, we can't just give all our money away. Like, we have a family to raise, we have people to take care of, we have, stuff to do, right? So we can't just give it all away, but we do have to have a plan for how we are going to be generous. So when you said a minute ago that you felt like you couldn't be generous anymore because we had to cut back, we had to cut back because our overall income level went down. However, the percentage probably stayed the same, right? Or even a little bit higher. And that's where I think you think more in the lines of like amount of giving, and I think more in the lines of like percentage of giving. So that's also true.
Right.
And you're a winner. Like you're a competitor. You're like I always want to do the best we possibly can, and when we can't do that anymore, we suck. And that's not.
What do you
true.
mean? I have to shoot a 2-point shot. I want to shoot the 3-point shot.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Just take 2 steps back, and I got a 3 out of it, not 2. Yeah. Well, you got to be able to shoot those shots, though, right?
I can.
That's part of it.
I can shoot those shots.
So what we set out early with having these discussions. Once again, we're thinking back on how we did these things now in order to help others accelerate and how they can talk through those things now.
Right.
Because we fell into these types of things and we had good principles along the way. I remember one of the earliest memories I have of us discussing finances was reading Dave Ramsey's, one of his first books, Total Money Makeover. Is that right? I think that's what it was. And I'll be honest with you. Well, how honest do I want to be?
Less.
Dave Ramsey has some issues nowadays that he needs to work with between his businesses and him and the Lord and all this kinds of stuff. So I'm not endorsing by any means anything that he's got his hands on right now. However, this book
at that point in our lives
was huge because when we got together, we had quite a bit of debt that we had to take care of in order to buy our first house. And he introduced this snowball principle when it came to paying debt off. Can you talk through that?
I can.
Okay, talk through that a little bit, and at least how we did it.
Sure.
Maybe it'll be helpful for somebody.
Yeah. So I'm maybe going to get his principles wrong, but I'll tell you how we did it because it worked for us. I brought to the table some.
I wasn't going to say who brought the debt to the table.
It's fine.
I brought student loan debt, and you brought
shopping debt.
Shopping debt. We were young. We were 20 years old.
We were young. I really needed that cute bag. Anyway, so we had some debt. So in tiny credit cards, they were, they just chip away at interest rates and such, and we can go into the whole financial yellow brick road, but we won't. So you chip away at each tiny bill. Maybe you take the highest percentage rate, or maybe you take the one lump sum that you can tackle if you give up that Netflix or that 4 cups of coffee that week or whatever it is. But it was.
Did the internet even exist when we got married?
Jeez, I don't know.
Yeah, it did, but it was
barely.
Young. It was young. It was only about 10 years old.
It was young. So it wasn't as distracting as it is now. We kind of just chipped away at our debt. And I think we did it pretty organically, but as we saw fit, and it would launch us forward into being able to make room and improve for margin for generosity, but also to steward well with how we would grow financially.
So the principle, though, that he talked about was you're paying all these payments, right? And he would say, take the highest interest rate payment first, tackle that, get that paid down and paid off, and then use that same money that you were paying to pay that off
to pay the next one.
Don't decrease what you're paying on debt. Use that same amount and tackle the next one, and then the next one and the next one, while you're still using, like say you're paying $1,000 a month off on debt, but it's spread across 10 different credit cards. Picks the highest one first. Tackle it with $1,000. Tackle it with whatever you're paying, and get it down as fast as possible, and then use that as the next one. That's the principle, I guess.
Right. And
how we did that was similar. We kind of had our own sort of twist on it, but one of the things that you did that's typically frowned upon that actually worked for us was the credit card thing. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure. So when you go to Banana Republic and I'm going to throw back the Bon-Ton.
Bon-Ton.
The Bon-Ton.
Victoria's Secret.
No.
Oh.
I bought lotion there.
We were married.
And you take those high interest rate cards and you open a credit card. And I did this to the tune of whatever the largest credit limit we could get, which, I mean, and when I'm talking large, I'm thinking like $5,000. And you take all those high interest rate cards and you put them onto another card. Well, that new card from Citi or wherever it comes from is going to, no endorsements, and
some Visa or MasterCard or something like that.
It's going to go on to a 0% for 18 to 24 months.
Transferred in.
Yeah,
right?
You transfer them in, and you are going to just pay that down. Like
whatever you were paying previously, keep paying it, but pay it
now
on this
you've got
one card.
No interest rate.
Right.
And I think we did that maybe 2 times.
Initially.
Maybe.
But we've done it since then.
Yes.
So
maybe 2 times. And then open another credit card, transfer that one once the interest is about to hit, and you transfer it to a new one where there's 0 interest, and you just, again, pay, never incurring more interest on this debt.
Yeah.
That did work really well for us. I can't even tell you how many thousands it could have saved us.
Yeah, I really think so as well. And we're kind of getting into some of the more system-oriented things that we'll talk about in a second. But the philosophy behind what we were doing was all to not just get out of debt. For us, it was like we're under a conviction that we need to give to our church family. We need to help people who are in need, and we have no space at 21 years old, 22 years old to do that right now. We've got to figure out our debt situation.
Right.
And so our philosophy of getting towards a place of generosity was to tackle this in our household so that we can give with margin. And I love how I read somebody say, use your money to make the invisible visible. So when it comes to generosity, that's what you're doing. You're making the invisible attribute of generosity visible to somebody else, and that's bringing the gospel, bringing God to a situation like this. I think that for us, we got to a point where we were able to kind of almost challenge one another. Once we got better at kind of setting the tone for tithe and wanting to give, we're like, you know what? What if we increased our giving every single year? And what would that look like for us? And we did that for like 10 straight years.
We still lived in our first house when we did that.
We did. It was later on in that time, but it was still, we were still early on in our marriage, early on with kids, and we were like, no, we want to challenge ourselves to be more and more generous each and every year. And we increased by a whole percentage point every year for probably 10 years straight.
And that was through the purchase of a home.
Yep.
And adding 3.
The second home, which is like our next home. Yeah.
And adding 3 more children.
3 kids. Yep.
That we did not shy away from. In fact, I remember sitting down at one point with our spreadsheets and tears that...
A lot of tears.
There's so many tears because I just don't like spreadsheets.
Right.
And the sight of them makes me cry. That we looked at our budget and we realized we were frivolously spending $400 to $500 a month, and we didn't know where it was going.
Yeah.
That made me sick.
Yep.
And we tightened up things, and then I started to think that spreadsheets were probably a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a great spreadsheet that I think I got from some big church a while ago that is really, really helpful. It kind of tells percentages of how much your percentage of income and what range that should be for giving and saving and spending money on housing and transportation and food, and kind of gives a general range to let that number sit within. And then, it's super helpful for us. And this is what we visit every single year. So we're getting into the second piece of this, right? The second one is develop a household financial system. So we're there now. What does our system look like? For us, I'd like to say we're super intentional and systematic with how we do this stuff. We've gotten into a rhythm, especially in the last several years, where they end up being more like check-in conversations, and a lot more of like, hey, don't spend money on extra stuff this week. Mortgages due or whatever. Like we still do that, and it's not because
we need to meet goal.
Yeah, exactly. and again, it makes me feel like we don't have money, but the reality is, when I am being restricted from something, it's my opportunity to act in a discipline of restraint or of not, or giving something up or sacrificing something in order that we can live generously, right? So that can be frustrating in the moment when you tell me don't go out to eat this week, and I'm like, well, I don't want to make food at home. That's boring, But when reality it strikes, it hits me across the head, and I'm just being selfish and ridiculous about it. Right. So, yeah, you don't have to agree so harshly.
I didn't agree so harshly. However, you're not wrong. Is that better?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like not being wrong. I think developing your system though is so important, because you got to know who's going to handle the money. Like I alluded to earlier, I did at first, and I had no strategy. It was just money comes in, goes right back out to pay bills, and hopefully we have enough this week. Around the time our second child was born, you were staying home for a little bit, and I kind of was like, I need you.
He said,
this. So,
can you handle the bills for, the 8 weeks that you're home? I was like, I guess, sure, 8 weeks. And then 2 years went by.
15 years later.
And then 15 years later.
Here we are, almost 15 years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, who's going to pay the bills and be in communication, right? Like with the other. If you're the one paying the bills, tell the person, like, hey, this is what we got going on this week. A quick, Monday morning conversation or a quick Sunday evening conversation before you go to bed. Hey, this is what I see happening this week. This is where we're at. It's usually going to be your most administratively gifted person in the house that's going to be overseeing that, at least, and probably executing it. It doesn't have to be the woman who stays home from work, right? I know a lot of guys that handle the household income and all this stuff, and I'm like, why are you doing that? And they're like, well, my wife is not great with that kind of stuff. And I'm like the exact opposite.
Right, but you are high discipline. I am high administration, you're high discipline. So when I say, hey, the spreadsheet tells us yada yada about this week or this month, and I say, no, lunch is out or what have you, or date night is going to be in this week,
right?
Then you take that as a discipline challenge, where I'm like defeated because I had to tell you no.
Right.
And, it also, in our notes here, it says that you have a household financial system. We have 5 kids. There are 7 people in our house that have to take a shower.
And 2 dogs.
And drink water. And
2 chickens.
All those things.
Stupid chickens. Shh. Hate those chickens.
They're not laying eggs right now, but we won't talk about that. But you have all these little people in your house who are not so little anymore, and they have to take showers, and we're on a mission together. So we don't just leave the lights on willy-nilly or run the dryer endlessly and let our kids take 30-minute showers. Like that, I stick to a system. We have a short shower system. Their bodies are little. They don't need to spend that much time in the shower. And
I have also drastically decreased my shower time over the years.
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah. Because you were the main source of...
Yeah, I was the problem.
Yeah.
It was me. I was the problem. It's me.
Hi. So our teenagers are on board with that, and then they get to disciple their siblings down the line, and that's a household system we've set in place. Now we're just talking about one bill, but it's a big bill. It's a water bill. It's a light bill. It's a whatever. You don't get to have a snack every hour. That's ridiculous. And I'm really glad that they're back in school because they can't eat that much when they're there.
It's true. It's true. I think what's helpful in this part of the discussion for us today is that we have our giving that we give to the church. For us now, which really started in 2014, we did a big building project in 2014, and then we did another stewardship project in 2016 that we called Grow OV that built Coaster Coffee. And then in 2019, we started this thing called Multiply. And so since 2014, for us anyway, we've had to navigate giving to the church and then giving over and above, and how we're going to divide up the over and above. So now we're like managing our generosity at this point and what that looks like for us. Because we, like I said, we have increased giving now over the years, and now we're in this cool place where it's around 18 to 20% of our income that we're giving away now after the recent adjustments, which is cool. Not quite where we want to be. The spreadsheet I'm looking at right now says 19% actually. So we're not quite where we want to be, but we're getting there. And what we say with that is the church, no questions asked, to our local church, we give our 10%. And it might even be a little bit more than that, but it's around 10%, never less. And then everything else that we have left is like, okay, how do we divide that up?
Right.
And most of that goes to Multiply. And then we try to keep enough aside, that we could probably do better at just helping with margin to keep with random generosity, and helping people that, car broke down this week and we need to get a new tire or whatever, all that kind of stuff. And any comments on that structure?
You said manage generosity. Well, that sounds so much more fun than managing paying the bills. I look at the bills every week, and then overall over the month and say, okay, somebody must have been taking a really long shower or something. But I don't look at how generous we are as often, because I know that we've set that bar and we don't touch it until it's time to look at it again.
So that's
consistency.
Exactly that consistency. But then that yearly checkpoint for us is really around the time we do our budget every year, is around the recommitments for Multiply come around the May, late April timeframe for us. And so around that time of year, we're looking at, all right, what's our income? What's the strategy? What we're looking at for this year? How can we increase this year? And it gives us a chance to look at this spreadsheet and reorient some things and make sure we got the stuff covered that's coming up, and then and decide what we're going to give.
What's in the pipeline for Multiply? What's in the pipeline for our community, people around us? And we align that generous trajectory with our budget. I always put the generosity of in front, and that was not always the case for me. But now that we do it in that way at that time of year annually, that's my mindset.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not listed on here for us, but one of the giving that's lumped in there is specific giving, in our case, to international missions that we give to Mission Coalition.
Correct.
So we do have that in there with Multiply and the church, and trying to navigate those things together. So we've talked deciding early what your family or your household philosophy of generosity will be. We just did the developing a household financial system, which is a very fancy way to say figure out a plan. Like, how are you going to do it, right? Yes. Develop a household financial system. And the third one we have is devote time to talk openly about finances, putting feelings and pride aside for one another, knowing that you are for one another. We are for each other. We are on the same team. I'm watching the Coach Prime documentary right now, and I just get pumped up every time that dude talks. They just beat Colorado just beat TCU this past weekend, and like I'm all about some Deion Sanders right now, and I just want to listen to all his speeches and get pumped up about it. We are on the same team. We are for each other, right?
Well, let me be clear. When I have talked about these tiers in this last segment, I'm not upset. I just don't like this. There's just so much tension in this conversation for me that I always think we could do better if we had more. And that's not always the case. Would it be easier? Sure. But would we be frivolous if we had more?
Well, I think the volume would just increase, and we'd probably have the same principles in place. You know what I'm saying?
I hope so.
Like maybe everything would just a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
Right.
But I think what you're saying, what I think we would want would be if we got a generous income of some sort, that we would give a larger percentage of it in different capacities.
Right.
I'd like to think that's true as well. And it has been over the years.
It has.
Yeah. I don't know. I think so.
Yeah.
What would you do if you won the Powerball? What would you do with that money?
Buy a farm. Buy a farm in the country.
Buy a farm in the country.
With all the tools.
All the stuff.
All the tools.
With somebody to run the farm?
No, I want to do it. Tractors.
Tractors and horses?
Yep.
All the stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm. Pigs.
Okay. Oh, pigs, really?
I know. Abby wants pigs. It's cute. Chickens.
Whatever.
They're fun. And I want to grow blueberries.
If we're doing that, then
and apple trees.
Then we're getting goats, okay?
Okay.
Because they're funny. So I want to laugh at some goats. All right. So back to the serious stuff here. We're actually going to dream here in a second.
Okay.
So if we're devoting time to talk openly about finances and feelings aside and not being prideful, we don't want to attack one another if something goes wrong. Let's say a payment was missed, or we got to strap it down for like a whole month because, man, we really messed something up. I'm not attacking you, and you're not attacking me for screwing something up. We're a team, because if one of us fails, we all fail. Again, we were competitors growing up, so we kind of know the team aspect of things, but it doesn't always feel like a team. Sometimes it feels like you're on an island, or you're trying not to tell me no about something because you don't like to do that and trying to compensate for it over here. Meanwhile, you're super frustrated, and that's all resonating to every single person in the family. And so it's actually affecting all of us that you're frustrated.
From experience?
So, it's happened a time or two, we'll say. We're being honest on this place, right? This is a place where we can be honest, Robbie. Is that true?
I've been outed.
All right. Yeah. So, but that's what happens, right? Because we have to take a humble approach from both ends of this, having the attitude of Christ as he humbled himself as a servant. We see that in Philippians chapter 2. So this goes the opposite way as well. Like, I think sometimes we think that when people are defensive, that they've been attacked, or they're trying to, defend what was right or good or whatever. And this is not that, because being defensive is also a form of pride, right? Because being defensive is like, no, I did this right. I am right. I'm okay, right? But that's also pride, just as much as it is pride to say, you did this wrong, right? So that is not what we want here. We want to humbly approach one another and take time to openly talk about these things.
Yes. And also tell your administratively gifted person that they are doing a good job, and you do a good job of that. It doesn't mean that my frustration doesn't supersede that sometimes, because I feel that if we do something wrong in our administrative goals in our finances, that our kids could feel the brunt of that. And I don't ever want them to hear us being tight on the budget because, they can't ask for things, but there were some times in the last 6 months to a year that, the teenagers would ask questions, and I was like, all right, this is a learning space.
Yeah, we got to be honest with them at some level too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It can't all be ponies and rainbows. And
right.
Get everything they want, right? We don't do that.
So, and they embraced it. They really did at the beginning of that season for us. There were some situations where they were going to have to be at home with the kids so that work could happen for both of us at the same time. And they were crafty with their ideas and their ways to be generous with their siblings, because because apparently they saw it somewhere, and it spoke to my heart that we worked hard.
Yeah.
And they saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I was going to say that they, you're doing well when your 16 and 15-year-old are saying the same things that you say, or no, we can't do that. That costs too much money. Or no, like you don't want to give a poverty mentality,
right?
But at the same time, you do want to have a frugality, I guess, so that they understand, like, no, we can't. If we do this, we're not going to be able to do this more important thing over here, right? And yeah, that's cool to see that play out in the kids for sure.
So
the little one still wants a toy every time he goes to the store.
Every time.
Or anytime we go anywhere. Can I have? Yeah. No, boy.
No, I know.
Slap.
I know. Because this kid has 4 older sisters, and they give him everything. That's why.
Also true. Yeah.
We, quick aside, we went to a. It's not an amusement park.
The go-kart track?
Yeah, the go-kart track.
Yeah.
All right, so we go to the go-kart. We go
Finally
to the
got to
go-kart
teach
track.
my kids how to race and drive cars. It was awesome.
And it's expensive.
Oh yeah, it was.
But we knew, and we had a plan going in. We had a financial plan for fun.
Hey, Robbie, guess what? I got first place on the adult track. I was racing against like 8 other people, and I had the best time out of all of them.
Ask him by how many seconds.
Crushed them.
It
was like a whole second. It was at Motor World.
Motor World.
Yeah.
The last time I went to Motor World, I wasn't driving yet. I think I was like 14. And I got second place, but I didn't touch the brake the entire time, so I wasn't totally sure where it was, and I ended up slamming straight into the back of the person who got first when they were stopped. Yeah. I haven't been back since.
Wow, that's a great story. My now 16-year-old daughter didn't even do that. So.
However, our 5-year-old son did that.
Yeah, he did.
I believe it.
But we had a goal going into this trip.
It was her 16th
for
birthday,
her 16th birthday,
yeah.
And so we were trying to be okay. We're doing this. It's the 16th birthday, whatever. Okay, she's the only one that's going to get the all access pass, and we told them that, and they were prepared for that. But what we didn't realize was that when you send one kid on a ride, if she's the only one on the ride, it's not going to be fun. So we spent a little bit more money so the 14-year-old could do it too. And what was it, an hour into the whole?
Yeah, hour into her
3-hour pass.
Yeah.
And the kids did some rides here and there, all of them. And this lady stops us and she says, "Hey, I have this extra pass." And we're like, "Oh, she has like a ticket for a ride, right?" No, she had a 3-hour all access pass for an adult aged person. So our 14-year-old got that and accompanied the 16-year-old. So then the experience was enhanced by the generosity of just a random stranger.
Yeah.
And that's something that we want to have too, but we've seen it happen time and time again to us. When we went in with a plan, we were fine with the plan, and God's generosity just abounds.
Yeah.
Like it was.
And I wanted to be like, "Where were you an hour ago, lady?" I'm just kidding. No, because this is a really good point, because the Hindu people call this karma, right? And whatever you want to call it, it's not that. I believe it's the Lord's sovereignty over these things. Yes. But you do this well all the time. You were always thinking about, like in the grocery store, at the coffee line, or whatever, who you can bless or pay it forward to. I don't do that as well as you do, but you do a great job of thinking about other people in that way, and that's another good example of living and having the margin to be generous. in this case with your treasure,
I sneak
that's
out
really
though.
good. Yeah.
I'm like to the cashier, hey, do you see that guy over there getting the large coffee at, Country Fair? This is a North gas station. And she's like, yeah. Well, he has a donut too. I said, okay, great. Put it on I'll pay for it. But don't tell him it was me. I got to get out of here. And so I pay for it and then I'm out, You don't know this person and you probably never see him again. But I don't want someone to thank me.
Yeah.
I already feel thankful that I can do it.
Right. Because we know we have the foundation, the motivation of the Lord in us, motivating us to these things, which is really, that is the ultimate blessing, is again, making the invisible visible, right? That's what generosity is.
And then you get home and you tell your kids about it.
Yeah.
Guess what I just did?
Yeah. So devote more time to talk about these things openly, with a spouse, with a trusted person, whatever the case may be, within the household. The fourth one we have is dream together often. And if you don't have somebody to dream with in your household, dream with the Lord and write it down. Like, write down your dreams, your goals, your desires. If you're married, use vacation time, anniversaries, alone time together to dream. Ask good questions, like, what are you dreaming about right now? Like, what are you hoping for? What do you want to accomplish in the next couple of years? Give it a little time frame stamp on it. What's God laid on your heart? If money were not an issue, what would you be doing right now?
So Aaron, if you won the Powerball like right now, what would you do? Where would you go? What would you buy?
What would I buy? That's a different question, right? Because I would definitely set up some sort of travel situation with you and I going to some places that we've never been, that we've wanted to go forever.
Just as long as we don't have to hike. I'll go if we don't have to hike.
There's some hiking going on in Europe, so I don't know if we'd be able to do that. But
let's not go there.
Yeah, definitely that. I'd probably buy a dirt track race team, and
how about a dirt track?
And have somebody operate that.
If you buy the dirt track, I'll run it.
That would be fun as well. Yeah, I don't know. That's Powerball money though. That's not. That's this.
It's dreaming money.
That's dreaming money. Exactly. But I think when you dream, it's helpful to just go crazy like I just did, and that's fun, right? But now pair it back to the next 10 years. What's the next 10 years look like? We won't talk about how old we'll be in the next 10 years. But what are our 10-year goals regarding money and resources and what we have and what our intentions are with our careers and all these kinds of things? Then pare that down to 5 years, and then to 1 year. And then what do I got to do in the next few months in order to continue to achieve this 1 year goal, this 5 year goal, this 10-year goal? Like, keep the horizon in mind and in view, but know that you've got your checkpoints along the way and your now to-do items. And so if buying a dirt track is outside of that 10-year goal of reality, those are like what are the alternating timelines on the Marvel stuff? What's all that called that Loki has to go through?
I don't know exactly.
The variant, like
variants.
Is it the variant timelines that kind of sprawl off into different things, right?
Yeah.
You got your main thing and the variant timeline. Yeah. So the variant for us is we win the Powerball and things will change something, right? We'll be able to give and live generously and also have some more cool stuff because, it's kind of fun. However, reality check and what does the real next 10 years probably look like? What's the main timeline probably look like?
So what you're saying is in your practicality, in being diligent for your 90-day goals to your year and all that practical budgeting and spreadsheet is going to lead you into a more narrow path of being generous, but also getting to your dream phase.
Yeah. Aligning it all together, right? Making sure it's all together on the same track, not a variant track, but an actual focused track of what you're trying to accomplish as a whole household, as a family. Yeah. And write it down. I can't say that enough. Like, people just think like, I'll just think through my goals and think, okay.
I won't forget this.
Write it down. Write it down. I have, once a year now, over the last couple of years I've been doing this, I go away by myself, and I bought a whiteboard that's like a 2 foot by 3 foot whiteboard. And last year, I think it was, I did sort of my ideas for the next 10, 5, and 1 years. Mm-hmm. And I wrote it all out on this whiteboard, kind of brainstorming wise, and then I organized it. And I took a picture of it and brought that picture home to you and said, here's what I see, here's what I'm thinking. Let's talk through this. What do you think? And we kind of, honed some things down, and we've got some ideas of where we want to go. But it set up the conversation for us to have, just by the fact that I wrote it down. Because once you write it down, you have something to discuss. To me, it's still a dream if it's not written down. Because when it's written down, it starts to become a plan.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got to say that when we did dream about that timeline, or, set some practical goals into place, I'm the dreamer that doesn't need a plan. Like, I need a plan to, for dinner and stuff like that, but I don't need a plan for 5 years down the road. It's too far away. So I know we have to get there, but that's where you come in. Mm-hmm. I'll do the day-to-day stuff. Yeah. That long-term plan, that's you.
And again, I want to stress this, like, I think we get this idea because most often I think our situation is, I'll just say, the most normal in the sense of like you're the admin person. I'm kind of the not as organized, but the dreamer, visionary, but I've gotten a lot better at planning out these things as well. If those roles are flip-flopped, I want to say, like, that is okay. Like, if it's not the guy, if it's the gal that likes to dream and think out ahead, like, that's okay. Like, as long as this stuff is happening together, you guys are one unit. Like, so a little marriage point there, like that just being on the same page together is what's most important there.
Right. And if we can go back to, what was it, your statistic, that was a 50% divorce rate, and one of the top 3 reasons is money. I would say it's not always the money. It's just reasoning through what the vision is for the relationship, the future, the whatever. And money just becomes the problem. Money,
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down this point that I heard as well, that money doesn't make things happen, people do, right? Mm-hmm. So only humans have agency to act. Money has no ability to act or do anything unless humans are the ones beside it. Money is, in essence, wood and metal. But humans have the agency to act on what money can do. So earn a lot of money, make a lot of money, but the more you make, the more you can give away as well. And so that principle still remains. So,
all right, so we're going to hit that last
one. Here we go, host.
All right, discover. Discover someone outside your household to give feedback. Hear ideas. Talk to you about practicality. Make sure you're not crazy or, dreaming too big here. You said earlier in a conversation we had that you spoke to someone that we know and a trusted person, and you were talking about interest rates. What's going to happen in the next year? Mm-hmm. It's really good to bounce those ideas off of people. Did it have any, I'm sure you were thinking of something, houses, cars, whatever it was.
What we're going to do with the house and what projects we want to do and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's going to be, you have that conversation because it's driving your generosity. I we've had a couple who are very, very close to us, but the administratively gifted person in that relationship was the husband. And we had alongside each other, we worked at corporations. They were not the same corporation. And his administrative role in the family was the same as my administrative role. So we would talk about how insurance affected the kids that we had, and how to withhold from your taxes and what that looked like, come tax time or paying in.
Did you get life insurance yet?
Yeah, you do.
I'm saying
I know.
That's what he's.
That's what he always said.
Yeah.
How much life insurance do you have? And so that base would help us grow in things that we wouldn't have normally thought through. And that's really important. Now, enter in a different phase of life when we have 3 more kids than they do. It changes, but that was.
But they're usually still a step ahead in something because they're they're a little bit older than us, but yeah, they're always so somebody who's maybe a little further along than you is always going to be helpful. For some folks, they have really good relationships with their parents and have these kind of discussions with their parents. That's awesome. That's great if you have that. But no matter what, the person or people should at least know your philosophy and your own theology of finance and how you believe those things ought to be in your household.
I think that partnership aligned really well for the 4 of us, the 2 couples, because we did have generosity at the forefront of our minds, always. It was, okay, we're going to level up in the job, so generosity is going to level up as well, all the while paying your bills and taking care of your family and thinking about the future.
Yeah, and they can't just be those who agree with you,
right,
in philosophy, and those who are just going to say yes to whatever you're saying. Well, I was thinking about doing it. Oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. They're not supposed to be just encouragers. Right. Also having that prophetic edge to be able to say, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah. That purchase, I don't think you need that right now. Like, I know you're just asking me, but I'm just telling you because you're asking. That's probably not wise. That's
or
okay.
Maybe you don't ask and they just tell you anyway.
That's okay too.
That is okay.
Again, with humility, we remain friends and we're good to go.
Right.
So, yeah, that's good.
And that's just that speaking truth in your situation.
Yeah.
Having that person alongside you that's going to help you towards your future and generosity.
All right, so let's just talk, before we end the episode, let's just talk real quick about what that looks like for the church, for your community of faith. I know we've got a good portion of our listeners are folks that are just congregation folks that are in the church, that are loving their local church and are participating as families. And that last section we just did is going to be great for you and helpful for you. We also have a portion that are church leaders. And so I want to talk about that for a quick second, because I think that these same principles can apply to the church setting as well. So I think without jumping into it real quick, before I jump into it real quick, you have to talk about this stuff, and you have to do it often. I would go as far as to say you need to do it every single week, every time you have a gathering of the local church. Now, you might have a worship night, you might have a conference night, you might have those kind of other things that are offshoots that happen. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your normal Sunday or non-Sunday gathering. If you're in a simple church, a house church, whatever the case may be, you've got to talk about these things. Because if your church is poor or broke, as you might describe it, I would say either the people in your church literally don't have the means to support it financially, in which case then you're talking like streams of revenue and other things that you want to do to make sure that you can supplement income for the church itself. That is important, and that can be done. I would say that's more of a rare situation, though, because the reality is if the church is poor or broke, and you've got a bunch of middle class folks, and around here we got a lot of military folks that come to churches in this area as well, you're probably not talking about it enough. If you would say that our church just doesn't have any money, it's probably because you're not talking about it with the right biblical motivations, the right emphasis. Again, there's an overemphasis that can happen. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just talking about it, because if Jesus talked about it 15% of his times that he spoke, and there's that many verses in the New Testament and in the scriptures that talk about money, then we should be talking about it and talking about it often and rooting it in a biblical theology of finances. Now, you often speak well for those who are kind of the congregation members at large. I think you do a great job of having a pulse for those folks, because a lot of your leadership in our church and organization has been outside of the actual church itself, and been at like Coaster Coffee for a season and now at the school for this season. So how does that land for you when we talk about money in the church? What does that do to your heart, or how do you receive that?
I don't think I respond fine to it at church. I think it's never really been a problem for me. I always felt it was a really good challenge for us. Even when I didn't know why we were being generous. I mean, I understood kind of why we were being generous when we took that leap of faith and just jumped in at 10% a long time ago. But even now when we talk about it, we have a team of people who are so very well connected to our mission and the vision we have for our church and our community, and just being generous to any situation, whether it be international missions or local missions. We have someone who gets on stage, wherever it be in the service, and speaks to our congregation, visitor or not. I really believe it lands because it's from the heart. Sometimes our financial person speaks. Sometimes another pastor will speak. And sometimes we have someone from the school who is also a pastor will speak. And everyone's talk, everyone's vision and language connects really closely with the mission that we're on for our community, whether it is from the school, the church, or from the coffee shop. We're all in the same mission. Our language is very tight. We want the same things for our community. We're local or we're international, but it's from being generous. If I ever feel it lands harsh, I am first to say. So we hit this a little hard today. And sometimes you can tell that from people's body language or just the overall tone of the room, kind of there's sometimes a shift or
sometimes we say too much. Right? Like
yeah.
Now, and I don't mean like we share too much information, just that
talk too long
a period of time.
Too long.
So,
and it's important and people are passionate about it, and that's okay, but there's a space for that. And so when we recognize that point to hit in that setting, where we're one congregation, we're all together. Sometimes you just say, now's the time where we give. And if you don't understand that, we're going to flesh that out in our small group time.
One of my favorite sayings that Eddie Herrera actually uses a lot, that I have totally ripped off and said more often than anything, is, if you've never given, give once. If you've given once, give regularly. If you are a regular giver, give sacrificially. That progression, I think, is just a helpful, very practical way of talking about this. Like, well, I've never given before. Okay, give once. Well, all right, I gave once, a while ago. All right, well, consider being a regular giver. Well, I'm definitely a regular giver. I give every time I get paid. Cool. Could you consider what sacrifice might look like for you? Right? It just gets really practical and hits you right where you need to get hit.
Yeah.
each week.
And it's an open dialogue too.
Yeah.
When you're in those spaces with your friends or your small group, or you come face to face with a pastor and you have a specific question and it leads to this thing that's on your heart. Like if that's one of the things that you're constantly thinking about, that is a conviction, and that is giving sacrificially. That is thinking sacrificially, and that just turns into generosity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from a church leader perspective, you got to be open with your congregation about where the money goes. Like your book's got to be open, especially in a nonprofit. None of us are supposed to benefit from this thing. So, we have to have open books really legally more than anything, but operate that way. It's okay. Be open-handed with what you have, and be open with where things are going, whether you're a simple church. And by the way, sometimes the simple churches are the hardest on this because they miss out the most because they don't talk about giving, and they don't give unless they are giving to meet one another's needs, which is good, but it's not regular. I would argue that regular giving, even in a simple church, a house church setting is what I'm talking about, is important. Even if that money sits in a coffer for some time, you've got to give people the chance to be regularly generous. In house church setting, established church setting, brand new church plant setting, whatever the case may be, you've got to set people up for that opportunity.
And being consistent in that is a discipline.
Yes.
Being consistent with all the things you do, and money being one of those things that can go either way in, being generous or being tight-fisted. If you're consistent with the way you give and how you're generous, no matter what situation is, simple church, large congregation, whatever your circumstance is, that consistency, it will just overflow into all areas of your life.
So just before we end here, let me quickly go down these 5 things in your church setting, okay? If you are going to apply these personal principles that we have really discovered over the years, if I were to apply them to a church setting, I would say it this way. Number 1, decide early, and if you've never decided, decide right now what your church philosophy of generosity will be. We as a church did the same thing that you and I did as a family, and we decided at one point we are going to give 10% of our general budget giving away off the top. So that goes to missions organizations, that goes out the door. 10% of everybody's general tithe that comes in goes out. And that has proven to be such a blessing for a lot of people over the years, a lot of situations, a lot of missions agencies, a lot of folks that maybe come and they say, hey, would you consider giving $100 a month to me as a missionary? And we would be like, you know what, for a year, we can actually do that because we've got this money set aside that we give every single week. Right. That's important. So decide what your church philosophy of generosity will be. Number 2, develop a church financial system. Once again, it sounds really elementary, but who's going to pay the bills? What's the budget look like? Who's going to oversee that? How are the elders of the church leadership going to be involved, and who are they accountable to? How is the congregation going to be able to see for the purposes of accountability? What are the allowances in each of the portions of the budget? I would go further than that and talk. We could talk specifics at some point in the future, but like we have our budget broken down into percentages. So 10% is given off the top, and we know that somewhere between 40 and 50% is probably spent on staff, which is kind of a national average type of thing, right? And we're in that 45 range right now. Another 20% is going to be set aside for operations or whatever. So all of these breakdowns are important, but you got to talk about them. You got to develop the system that you're going to operate as a church. All right?
On your spreadsheet.
On your spreadsheet, preferably on your spreadsheet that's shared that people can see. Devote time to talk openly about finances. Again, putting feelings aside in this case, and this is just like I said a minute ago, talk about it. Talk about it often, and devote time to talking about it and teaching about it and training about it and pointing to the biblical principles. Dream together often as a church. That's okay. Think ahead. What do we want to do with this old building that we inherited? Or what do we want to do when we want to take that corner over there and we see a building that we want and we're not sure we can get it? Then make a plan and go after it. And we at Multiply can help you think through that too, by the way. We love that kind of stuff. The business as mission for the glory of God is what we really want to help churches with also. The last one, discover someone outside of the church to get feedback and hear ideas and make sure that you're not crazy in the way that you're thinking about things. If you're not a part of Multiply, we can be that type of person for you. Maybe you've got another pastor friend or another church leader friend that can talk about how their church handles something, but you need an outside perspective when you show them your budget, show them your stuff, and say, hey, is this right? Are we set here? Am I thinking rightly about these things? And again, making sure that they're in agreement with your philosophy and your theology is helpful in that regard, but definitely being open about those things. So these principles are definitely helpful in the household, but they're certainly helpful in the church as well. And I hope that this has been helpful for you today. So as we walk away from here today, I hope that what everybody has taken away from this is that, sometimes you're not the most intentional that you should be with your finances and your generosity. And we're saying try to be as best you can. While we didn't have all these principles in place as we were working through them, we definitely had a clear, again, philosophy and theology of generosity and finances and how to use those resources for God's good and His glory. And now I've been able to look back together with you and sort of organize how we did it. That's really what today has been about. And so I hope this is helpful for you to, as a listener, to try to organize what this might look like in your own life and, again, be a little bit more intentional with it. So before we get wrapped up today, though, do you have any resources that you want to share or want shared on this conversation?
Well, I think it has been helpful as much as I joke about spreadsheets. The one that we use is really, really helpful in our home space, of course. But I think that if we have a shareable link for that spreadsheet, obviously people can download that and make it their own. I think that would be a great resource.
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned, I'm always going to probably recommend books and stuff. So I mentioned The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn already. If you are a church planter and you're thinking about what church planting looks like, Funding Your Ministry by Scott Morton is a book that we actually give out with times 12 to all of our planters that go through fundraising workshops with us because it's super helpful when thinking about fundraising. Again, fundraising, if you're on a missionary budget and lifestyle, salary, whatever, that doesn't exclude you from being generous. You now get to leverage other people's generosity for you to also be generous in your way and lifestyle. And really, that's the shift we're talking about here, right? Is not just make more money, get more money, give more money away. It's like, no, let's think about all of this through the lens of generosity and stewarding and managing God's resources well. I think that's the most important takeaway from here.
That's good. Well, what are you listening to right now, Aaron?
I listen to podcasts and sports radio most of the time. So driving around, Colin Cowherd's my man. I like to listen to him a lot. I like to carry Newhoff Leadership Podcast. There's some good stuff on there lately as well. He just recently did his entire collection of Tim Keller interviews. It's like a 3-hour episode that I've had to push pause on multiple times, which you might have to do on this episode because we're a little longer today. Must be you, the long-winded one, with this. But yeah, so that's definitely it. And then on the music side, I just discovered actually these high fidelity hymns, and I can't remember it's like, he pronounces it saint, but he's English, so he spells it weird. So it's SXXNT as the artist, and you can find him on Spotify. But these high fidelity hymns are basically modern sort of chill hop versions of some old hymns, just for listening music if you're in the office or stuff. So that's kind of fun. I enjoyed that. How about you?
I have recently gotten back into listening to some Phil Wickham.
Ooh.
As my 10-year-old would tell me this morning in the car that the song "You're Beautiful" is old, his old stuff. I thanked her for that. Yeah. But a little bit of Phil Wickham, some gospel. kind of switching some things up as the season's changing from summer to fall. Not so much today with this temperature, but just a little bit of switch.
Yeah.
Just
some Mav City. I like some old Andre Crouch and
Yes.
like that old era.
First day of school, back to school was Smile by Kirk Franklin.
Yes.
The kids are just hilarious with that song, and I love it. It just makes my heart so happy.
Yeah.
So,
Makes it smile, you might say.
I was smiling on the way to school. Maybe it was because our kids were going back to school.
Indeed.
So, well, with that, we're going to wrap things up today here. Thanks, Aaron, for joining me on Behind Open Doors.
Yes.
You've been listening to Behind Open Doors podcast, where we take you behind the scenes, discovering what it takes to multiply disciples, leaders, and new churches. Let the word dwell richly in you, and may God multiply your efforts for the kingdom.